Hello and welcome to an all-new BWI Daily Recruiting Show episode. I'm Greg Pickel, Ryan Snyder, always here with us to give us the newest and latest Penn State recruiting news. T. Frank doing a great job producing for us as well. Ryan, it's spring break week. This is going to be a shorter show. Of those of you that are loyal listeners to the Daily and the Recruiting Show, we appreciate you, and you know that typically these can go a little bit longer than normal. This is going to be a bit of a tighter episode because it is spring break week. The coaching staff is on a well-deserved vacation. No recruits are on campus, even though the March quiet period is underway, and thus we only have a few things to hit on. But there was a big new offer that came out. There's some staff changes that are on the horizon. So, Ryan, another Tuesday. Here we are. How are you? How are you doing? What's new? Anything before we get rolling here?
Yeah, beautiful spring break in Bellefonte, Pennsylvania. It felt like spring break yesterday, man. It was really nice
Sure
out.
did.
It was good. I was able to take my kids to ride a bike. So I guess that was actually really 2 days ago because yesterday it kind of rained them. But
Right.
yeah, I mean, it's slow right now. We're I think this time next week we'll be able to start putting a list together for that March 19 date, and then before you know it, it'll just be rapid fire mode. We'll have so much to talk about once spring ball gets going. But we're just kind of in a little bit of a jam right now with coaches on vacation and a lot of players still focused on basketball. Rodney Gallagher, thanks for doing the show with T. Frank the other day, and congrats to him for winning the Whippeal championships. I'll be watching him closely as they advance. I'm really hoping they make it to the Giant Center for the state championship because I would love to go watch them down there. But aside from that, man, yeah, we're just kind of hanging out, seeing any new offers, and just kind of we got a guy here or there ready to come and visit. But pretty quiet week overall.
Yeah, you'll definitely want to check out that interview with Rodney Gallagher, bluewhiteillustrated.com, also youtube.com/bluewhiteillustrated, and wherever you get your podcast. If you're listening that way, you can find that interview with T. Frank. Really insightful stuff. It was great to get to know him a little bit more and kind of hear about everything that's going into his recruitment, which of course Penn State is right in the thick of and could even be considered the leader for. So time will tell. Long way to go in that one, but let's get into the news of the week, Ryan. London Montgomery is a guy you've written about before at bluewhiteillustrated.com. He was waiting for a Penn State offer the last time you did a story on him. That offer has now come, and obviously it's a big one for him. It's one he was waiting for. Let's start with this. We have a lot to get into with him, but what made the trigger go all of a sudden? Because this was a guy who Penn State's known for quite some time, and they finally now are in the mix for him. They've added themselves to that conversation.
I again, everybody's on vacation, so it's hard for me to get that answer at the moment. I wrote last week that I thought they were going to wait, and literally, what was funny about that is I wrote in my mailbag that let's see how he does in track this year, and let's see what happens. And then I come to learn then that they actually offered him on Friday. So pretty much I put my mailbag out, he already had an offer. I just didn't know about it, of course, till Sunday. What made them go? I mean, I think when you just look at their running back board, it's all national recruits who,
right?
I mean, aside from Trayon Webb, are they really, going in the right direction with at the moment? I can't really point to too many. And even with Webb, he has a Baylor official visit lined up now, and multiple others. I mean, South Carolina's one, and I'm drawing a blank on the third, but of course, Penn State's one of them too. I think Arkansas is the other one. Yeah, Arkansas. Yeah. And let me run through Trayon Webb scissors real quick. Baylor June 4th, Penn State June 11th, Arkansas June 17th, and then South Carolina June 24th. So all those schools are in the mix. He just went to Florida the other week, so this is a guy who, yeah, I mean, there's reason for Penn State fans to be excited about. Penn State's firmly in the mix, but to me, I just don't think he's a lock. So. Is London Montgomery a lock? No, I don't think we should pencil him in quite yet. But he's a young man who's said multiple times that he's very interested in Penn State. He's admitted to being everything from his dream school to his favorite school growing up to the school he's watched a lot. He told me that Michigan game in 2019, was a game he really watched and really got into, and ever since then he's followed. And I talked to his coach then, which I'll have an interview coming up here in the next day or two, and. He really talked about the Saquon Barkley effect and just kind of, like all these young men growing up in the region, watching Barkley at Penn State, and that kind of got him in the Lions. So I do think there's plenty of reason for fans to think that there's a good chance that Montgomery will be part of this class. But look, I mean, Penn State wasn't speaking with him nearly as much as they were with some other guys. And, London and I talked about that kind of a little bit more off the record. Now, he did say on the record, like, hey, I'm not not talking to them as much as some other schools. But, off the record too, I mean, he was kind of hinting that he'd like to talk to Penn State more. And sure enough, that was in an interview we did last week. And then sure enough, he gets the offer on Friday, and here we are now on Tuesday. So I expect Jaywan Snyder to really step it up from that department and get to know he and his family more. And all signs point to this being a player that they should be able to land. And he's a heck of a player too, man. 2,300 yards rushing last year. There's a lot to like from that perspective. And he seems like a great kid too. I mean, that's actually the main thing I can stress is just how good of a kid he seems to be, and especially from talking to his coach, everybody speaks really highly of his leadership and all those things. So a lot to like from that perspective. But let's see how these visits wind up this year. He just went to Syracuse this past weekend. Expect him to go to Boston College probably on that March 19th, which is setting up to be Penn State's big weekend. So maybe something changes there. Maybe he still goes to Boston College. We'll see. But I would expect London to probably be back, if he's not that weekend, another weekend, and maybe even for the blue-white game as well.
5'10", 180-pound running back out of Scranton Prep. On three is a little bit higher on him than the consensus. We have him as the nation's number 266 player, a 4-star, number 19 running back overall. The on three consensus has him just inside the top 400, a 3-star and a number 28 running back. And I think you make a good point here in that there's a lot of positions. We talked about this some on last week's recruiting show, BWI Daily, that there's some positions where they are really national at this point, and there are not a lot of local names on the board, regional names on the board, or guys who you can just point to and say, yeah, Penn State sits really well for them, So I think running back certainly one of them. We've talked a lot about Trayon Webb, but offering Montgomery now certainly I think makes a lot of sense. He'll be a name to watch closely. Anything you learned from him when talking to his coach that told you more about him than what you previously knew? And just to run through this here quick, you did mention it, but Penn State, he has visited twice. He's going to see UConn in March, Boston College in March, Rutgers you saw in January, and he'll see Syracuse in March as well.
Yeah. I just went to Syracuse. And I mean, I'll be curious to see if Penn State tries to squeeze out UConn for that visit the week after March 19th. So what's that, March 26th or something like that? I'll be curious because Penn State wants to get him here ASAP, and it seems like he's going to take that Boston College visit. But we'll see. I'll be monitoring him closely for those two visits. Speaking to his coach, I mean, it was a lot of praise for just who he is off the field and his leadership and his commitment in the weight room and stuff. Which is what you expect from a coach. They get to see that stuff a lot more than we do. So that was a big takeaway. I would also say I reached out and asked kind of who are those schools who haven't offered yet that we're keeping an eye on. You mentioned that Michigan and Notre Dame are both sincerely interested. Have had multiple conversations with coach about them, and I get the impression they might be those spring evaluation kind of schools that come out and maybe give them a look during the workout and at the end of April. But I think he also mentioned West Virginia. I think Oregon, he said, poked around a little bit. So, I mean, there are some serious Power 5 schools that are interested. And, of course, he has some other quality offers, too. I know Michigan State's one of them. I'm trying to think who else. I think Louisville was one of them. A couple other quality schools. So, I mean, he has plenty of interest. Oh, Iowa's the one I was trying to think of. With Penn State offering now, man, you would think that if they're able to get him on campus maybe another time or two, step it up, have a Zoom or two, get Franklin in front of the family, it should put them in a very good position. So I think there's reason to think that he's going to probably be a running back in this class. And then, hey, look, they can take two. I've been predicting for the longest time that I don't think they will, just because I think that also, if they get Montgomery in April or May, we'll say, if they get him at some point here in the spring, how does that impact Trayon Webb, of course, down the road? So, my prediction right now would be probably like a 20% chance that they take two running backs, but they can definitely afford to do that, especially if it's early in the cycle, before, mid-July or something like that, when mid-July now feels like commitment season. So, maybe that is even a little bit too late, but if Webb and Montgomery were to commit, by the end of June or something like that, it's certainly possible.
Well, keep in mind, Trayon Webb has a visit scheduled to Penn State. He was the first guy actually to lock in his official visit coming up in June. So Penn State's running back board starting to take shape. But in terms of offers and things like that, and of course visits, you're not going to see too many more of those. Probably won't see any more of those this week, I wouldn't think, as again, the staff is on vacation, gearing up for spring practice. It's the BWI Daily Recruiting Show edition on Tuesday, March 8th. I'm Greg Pickel, Ryan Snyder, of course, here giving us all the recruiting insight as well. And Ryan, One thing that has been pretty consistently talked about here on the daily, whether it's with Nate and T Frank or David and Nate and T Frank on the live show, you and I, of course, as well, here on the recruiting show, we talk a lot about Penn State needing to do more in terms of commitment. And James Franklin talks about that all the time in terms of adding bodies. And, you were the first to report that they added 3 analysts. They've now added the 4th. They've added an assistant recruiting coordinator as well. And now they're on the hunt for more. I guess my first thought is let's cover the news of the day that you reported on Monday night, but then also get to just what all these additions mean for Penn State moving forward.
Rashad Rich, and give credit to Football Scoop on that one. They really reported it, and we kind of grabbed it from there. And I have spoken with Penn State people now. That's pretty legit. That's going to happen here. I wouldn't be surprised if he's official when they get back from vacation next week. But Rich has been working as a scout with the Saskatchewan Roughriders. I thought was interesting. One thing when I was digging on him last night is he actually interned with the Bears with Ashton Washington. Did you ever get to know Ashton?
I did not. No.
Yeah, she's Parker Washington's sister, and if you followed Parker Washington's recruitment, Ashton was incredibly aggressive at getting different videos out there, and when they would go on visits, she was very active with that stuff. And she's really, man, in the last couple of years, she's really made major strides as far as her career. She was part of Illinois' recruiting staff. She was part of Texas Tech's recruiting staff. And then she took an internship with the Chicago Bears, and I know the Bears hired her full time in August 2021. I think she's like the first female scout for at least the Bears. I'm not sure if it's the entire NFL, but I believe with the Bears. So Ashton's I really enjoy getting Ashton back in the day, and Rashad was in that same internship process. Now, of course, they also added Rashad Elby, which you reported on last week. He's been all over a little place, like a lot of coaches and scouts are. I think what he played at Kent State, I believe it was, and
he had 2 different playing stops. I'm trying to think of the other one. It's the one he graduated.
I think it was Hampton.
That's
Hampton.
It. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And he's been all over the place. He worked for the NCAA. He was a part of the NFL Regional Combine Initiative. He was a position coach in the PSAC. I mean, yeah, he's done a little bit of everything. And it seems like the Rich is kind of the same way. And that's what honestly, it's what most of your recruiting type staffers, that's the background they're going to have. They kind of have been everywhere. You're not really going to, in most cases, get somebody like a Kenny Sanders to come back who's been kind of the man all along and has done this kind of work for a long time. You're going to get people bouncing around from spot to spot to spot when some of them have goals of making it back to the field. Some of them don't. They want to rise the ranks and maybe one day be an Andy Frank, the director of player personnel who runs the recruiting department. So it's interesting, though, that Penn State keeps adding these spots. They're not nearly what some of the SEC schools are at, and even probably some Big Ten schools, but they're getting closer with each one of these hires they make.
Yeah. So I talked about this a little bit last night when the Rashad Rich news kind of popped up. And basically, Penn State, first off, Penn State is over 40 members in their staff now for their entire football staff, which I believe I'm pretty confident that's the first time that's ever happened under Franklin. I mean, they're adding people, right? So why would it not be? Which is good. I know that I remember talking to somebody like a year ago, and I just remember they threw the 40 number out there as far as like that's a benchmark they want to get to. So that's a positive. The recruiting staff alone now is at 10 members, and that's good. I believe Ohio State has a few more, and I know some of those top SEC schools, like the number that's always been given to me is 12 to 15 is, what you see at LSU, Georgia, Alabama, those schools that just have those bankrolls and can do whatever they want from that hiring kind of perspective. So, with Penn State being at 10, that's a positive. And I am expecting additional hires to come. So, what I think, Greg, I mean, you kind of showed me it this morning. I think they've already kind of listed 2 more jobs for the recruiting department. That you saw that this morning, right? I think you told me that this morning.
Yeah. So they're looking for someone to kind of run operations and visits, which Destiny Rodriguez currently does very well. And they're looking for an assistant in that role. But if you actually look at the job listing of the assistant listing, it was actually for an analyst. So we'll see what that second one is. The listing and the info don't necessarily jive. But I mean, for Penn State, they just need bodies. I mean, we sit here and talk all the time about guys going into the transfer portal and players getting offers. And I know it seems like it should be easy, but it's not. There's a lot of time and investment that needs to be made to find these players and go after them and have enough information to go after them. You need bodies to do it. You can't have one person do it all, and that's what you see Penn State doing here, adding eyes, adding hands, and adding people who are very good at what they do to try and help improve this football program.
So basically what I'm expecting to see is I expect their recruiting staff to stay at 10. And, right now they're at 10 and they're trying to add people. So what does that mean? Well, I think what we're going to see, I don't know this for sure. Again, everybody's on vacation this week, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see one or two of their current recruiting staff, take different roles within the football program here. And that's something I think we'll see in the coming weeks. So, I mean, you mentioned, recruiting coordinator of operations. So maybe Destiny will be somebody to watch taking a different role. And I know for sure that something that they want to add is somebody who's focused on NIL. So whether that's, somebody who currently is on the staff or they bring somebody in, I know they definitely want a full-time role with somebody who, I would think that it will come from somebody who's already there personally, because they know the program, they know what Franklin wants, and it makes sense from that perspective. So maybe somebody on the recruiting staff, we'll see what happens. But I know there's shuffling going on there. They plan to add 2 more recruiting people, or at least 2 more staffers. Maybe it'll be 1 recruiting, 1 analyst. You said that one of them was for an analyst role, but I just see more movement coming from that perspective, more additions coming, and the total staff should be somewhere around 42, I believe, when it's all said and done. So that's a big positive there. I know Franklin's been fighting hard to get those numbers up, and I think that's progress, right? I mean, that's why the whole contract dispute, that we saw throughout the football season. I mean, this is why. This is adding these people, growing his staff, being able to split up duties, more people working on different things. And then now, of course, with NIL, I expect that to be a major, major emphasis for somebody on this staff, and maybe even multiple people on this staff moving forward, because that's kind of the one area they haven't succeeded with yet. And I know it's not from a lack of effort. They're trying to find different ways. So maybe putting somebody in that role to focus on that full time. I know that's something Franklin wants to do. So keep an eye on that here in the weeks ahead.
Yeah, there was a job posting on Penn State's website that is no longer there, but it was we reported on it a few weeks ago, and it was not like the title was not basically NIL director, but that's what the job description was. I mean, there were some other things in that role, some of the things that Michael Hazel did for Penn State and for James Franklin prior to him leaving for Virginia Tech, but the top listing was not by mistake. The first bullet point was about NIL, and I believe the second one as well. So we will see some movement on that front soon. It won't surprise me, like you say, if it's somebody who Penn State fans are familiar with. But all told, this is this is going to sound like a joke. It kind of is. It kind of isn't. But it's a good thing they're expanding the Lasch Building, because they need more room for these people. And I know that Lasch Building expansion is about the weight room. It's not about office space. But,
well, it's about office space too, though. I mean, it is about some office space. They definitely need more of that. So, yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you got people working in coat closets and things like that. I'm half joking, half not. But, yeah. So this is right.
They were old coat closets that they've expanded. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, but it's just the point being that as we sit here on the cusp of spring practice starting in 2 weeks, it's a reminder that, as James Franklin always says, it is a year-round business. The coaches get vacation here. You and I will take vacation. We don't obviously work for the program, but our calendar kind of aligns with theirs for the most part. So, we'll take some time when they take some time. But the point being is that the reason everyone loves Penn State football is that it's a 365, 24/7 passion for so many people, and that requires a lot of people to support it. And so as you see Penn State adding these things, I think it's important to remember that that's the goal. The goal of all of this is to be the best they can be all year round, 24/7, and you can add people and make that more of a reality year in and year out. So they're not the only program doing this. Of course, they're in fact behind many programs who have already done this, but you got to start somewhere, Ryan, and this is a good place good a place as any.
I will say, I mean, with the added recruiting staff and stuff, I mean, they are in a good spot in the Big Ten. At least I believe they are. I haven't gone through everything, but just from talking to Penn State people, I mean, I know 10 to 12 kind of staffers was really what they wanted in their recruiting staff, and they thought that would stack up well with, I think Ohio State still has a few more, but I believe they're ahead of a lot of the schools that Penn State fans would expect them to be ahead of. So that's a positive. I think that these additions, have them ranked up pretty close to the top in the Big Ten. So that's a positive. I don't think they're ever going to catch Alabama and Georgia and LSU and all the money that's down there. I mean, even some of the mid-tier SEC schools are just putting so much money money into stuff now that I don't know if that'll ever get, caught up, I guess is the right way to say it. But we'll see. Time will tell. Franklin's going to certainly keep fighting for it. I can promise you that.
No doubt about it. All right, we're coming down to home stretch on this edition of the BWI Daily Recruiting Show. Ryan, a couple odds and ends here to close things out. We have talked before on the show about North Texas twins Grayson and Gabriel Murphy. Penn State and many other schools were pursuing the defenders. There was a chance, I think, that they were going to officially visit maybe in the spring, but that's no longer going to be the case for the Lions or anyone else. Look, we haven't talked to these two, but they did commit to UCLA. We don't know much about their decision-making process or what they were looking for or anything like that, but we can say now that they are off the board. They're committed to UCLA. Ryan, I'll just throw it to you quick. I know we don't really have much to say on this other than to make note of the news, but for Penn State, again, the pursuit of maybe a linebacker, maybe a defensive end continues in the portal, and it's yet another reminder of how difficult it can be to land guys from other schools.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, they were when I've asked about guys, portal guys who they expect to visit, those two were mentioned, along with Steen and, maybe one or two others, but mainly just Steen, I would say. That Steen and the Murphy twins were the ones that were kind of consistent, right? So I do think that's a loss there because that's somebody, those two were both guys that Penn State was pursuing. So like you said, man, we never got to speak with them. I don't think they spoke with anybody. I don't know if I've seen any interviews about their
if they
process.
did, I've not seen any. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, that's not terribly uncommon. I mean, again,
No.
I go back to Anthony Dominic, who I was lucky enough to get to chat with not too long ago. I mean, but they're few and far between. I mean, and again, we've hit on this before, but for anyone who maybe hasn't caught previous shows, we'll just spell it out real quick. Portal guys and high school recruits are two entirely different beasts, really. I mean, there's just different things they're looking for, different ways they're going to go about the process, different expectations they have about what things are going to be like. And so most of them don't really open up. I mean, you might get lucky in a dad. Like I think Tyler Steen's dad's pretty good about communicating things with various outlets. And you have some guys who are like Dominic who are willing to talk. But for the most part, these guys, you don't get a lot of info from them about what they're going through, which is so different from high school recruiting, of course, where those guys, most of them anyway. I mean, in some cases they're not, but most of them tend to be pretty open about things.
If you would have offered me an opportunity to do interviews when I was 16 and compared to when I was 20, I probably wouldn't have nothing to do with it either, man.
Yeah.
Just considering where I was at that time of my life. But a couple more odds and ends I'll hit on real quick. I mean, Derek LeBlanc announced that he's going to announce his decision in July.
I love it. We have announcements about announcements. It's beautiful.
Yeah. I mean, he's aiming to announce with, I believe it was Peyton Kirkland and Malik Bryant. They're all, I believe, like Orlando-based prospects. So I'll be kind of curious on that one because LeBlanc was somebody who I thought Penn State was not necessarily a favorite with, but somebody I could see them being, top 3, top 4. And maybe those guys will go to 3 different schools. I don't know. But, just from talking to people, some thinks that they may be going to the same place. So that'll be interesting to see what happens. And then one guy, Greg, I didn't talk to you this before we started the show, but one thing I was thinking about maybe talk about is Andrew Repellier, who is committed to Michigan at the moment. There was news last week that Neo Avery is going to play defensive end. I was able to confirm that, and that looks to be official. So at least those talks have progressed to the point where that's what he's thinking he's going to do. So of course, I think we spelled it out pretty clearly that Repellier, I thought, was leaning towards Penn State and was going to end up at Penn State. Neo Avery commits on New Year's Eve and everything gets all screwed up. And then Repellier ends up committing to Michigan. I don't know, what was it, like 16 days later or something like that. So
it wasn't long.
Yeah, no, it was like a little over 2 weeks. So of course, Michigan has now changed their tight end coach. Jay Harbaugh was the tight end coach. He's moved, I believe, to defensive backs. And do you know how they hired a tight end coach? Grant Newsome. Do you remember Grant Newsome? I mean, we talked to Grant.
I do remember Grant Newsome. Yeah, he was on their off-field staff, and they promoted him. Yeah,
correct.
That doesn't surprise me. He was always. Yeah. You could tell he was kind of guy that could be a coach one day.
Yeah, really smart guy.
Injury career at Michigan, but yeah.
Yeah. I loved getting to know Grant back in the day, and I'm happy for him. He found his home in Michigan, and he seems to be moving up the ranks. But long story short, there with Harbaugh kind of moving, and he thought that was going to be his position coach. That that seems to have maybe changed some things. And, there's been, if you follow Twitter follows and things, Repellier's following a bunch of other coaches at other schools. And, we know Penn State has stayed on him hard. I've talked to EJ Holland about it, who, of course, covers Michigan for us. And, he noted that, that Repellier is definitely continuing to talk to Penn State. So let's keep an eye on that one. With Avery, of course, playing defensive end. I reported a while back about Matthias Barnwell playing defensive line. That path is now cleared. Joey Schlaffer, of course, is going to play tight end, but they can still take 2 tight ends there. And Repellier is really somebody that they wanted. They really wanted. And of course, with Avery, they really wanted Avery too. So it was just a kind of a tough spot to be in over those couple of weeks. But I think there's definitely a reason to keep an eye on him, and he could be somebody who potentially opens things up here in the weeks ahead.
Keep an eye out for that. You will find the latest Penn State recruiting news at bluewhiteillustrated.com, youtube.com/bluewhiteillustrated, and of course, wherever you get your audio. Ryan, any final thoughts as we wrap things up here on Tuesday? We're in spring break week. Then we have just one more episode left until Penn State spring practice begins. It's getting close. We can see it on the horizon. Any final thoughts?
Yeah. Camp season's here too. I just signed us up for Under Armour camps last night. T. Frank and I are going to go to Columbus, I believe, and you and I are going to go to Baltimore for Under Armour. So it's that time of the year. Elite 11's here. I believe Elite 11 comes to Massillon, I think the second week of April. I want to see who that is on that list before I definitely go out there. But we're definitely planning to go to Ohio and planning to go to Baltimore for camp season, and should have some good coverage there. I believe Columbus is 2 weeks from now, and then Baltimore's at the very end of the month. So it's that time of the year, man. Camp season, which is always fun. So getting excited for that. But yeah, really just waiting out this week, man. Get through this week, get the coaches back on campus, offers will start going out. I think by this time next week, especially by like Wednesday next week, we'll be able to put a visit list together for the upcoming week, and it'll be business as usual, up through the blue-white game. And even after that, then you got the spring evaluation period, which is always fun to follow everything. And then, you got the June official visit period that we always see. So we got 4 or 5 more days here of slow recruiting, and then it's pull my hair out until I can finally go on vacation in the summer.
What hair?
So,
what hair? Yeah.
Yeah.
We can't see all that hair behind.
Right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. I learned to shave it during the pandemic. It wasn't worth it. But anyway, yep, that's where we're at.
All right. Well, for Thomas Frank Carr, Ryan Snyder, I'm Greg Pickel. You've been listening to another edition of the BWI Daily Recruiting Show. Find our work wherever you get your audio at bluewhiteillustrated.com. We have $1 for 1 year of access on the subscription page, and you can see all the videos, T. Frank film eval, Rodney Gallagher interview, and more at youtube.com/bluewhiteillustrated. We'll see you next week. This has been the BWI Daily Recruiting Show.